Reprise de débat. The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. At the beginning of the debate today, I want to inform you that I will be splitting my time with the honourable member from Brandon-Souris, and I look forward to his comments as well. But I look at our Canada-U.S. relationship in relation to the current motion we have on the table today, and it's important for us, I think, to look at what's happened along the way that's led us to where we are today. And I go back to a time years ago when we first structured the initial Canada-U.S. free trade agreement. And it was an historic agreement at that point in time, but it took some significant doing to get over the line. And that was back in 1988 and initially instituted at the beginning of 1989. There were two leaders of two countries working in goodwill at that point in time, Prime Minister Brian Mulroney and U.S. President Ronald Reagan, recognizing that here in North America we had joint issues that would move forward better together than if we were apart. Trade was one of those issues. There were other issues as well, including continental defense, that were all part of the mix that we needed to address in that whole arrangement. But I actually want to bring members of this House to a point before FTA, Free Trade Agreement, 1988, and look at what happened, what Eastern Ontario looked like at that point in time. And I remember being in Ottawa, because I did work in Ottawa at that point in time, a previous point in my life. And I remember, if anybody can picture this, if you think about the Lord Elgin Hotel, which is a majestic hotel on Elgin Street, was actually shuttered, was actually shut down and ready to be demolished. There were several buildings around Ottawa that were half torn down. There was an economic demise that this country had undergone after the years of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, where economic sense had left this country and we'd damaged relationships with our most important trading partner, where our economy had suffered so badly, our dollar was plunging, we were in severe deficits and an accumulating debt that was mounting that we could not get out of. That's where free trade came to be so important. Now, I remember the election that happened in that year as well, 1988, and I remember the contest, the virtual signaling from the other side saying, this is the end of Canada as we know it. This is the complete demise of the nation that we built over the last 120 years at that point in time. And in fact, it was refreshing to see, after the success that the free trade agreement enjoyed, to watch the other opposition parties say, that was a great period for our country and one of the best moves forward we've ever had. But that's the start of it. Canadians decided in that election because it became an election issue. So Canadians got to vote on really the election issue, whether we should have free trade with the United States or whether we should continue to have separate arrangements on lots of tariffs between our two countries, and a branch plant economy in Canada, which wasn't serving us well. And Canadians decided to look ahead and move forward on our trade relationship. I would say that that led to much of the prosperity this nation has enjoyed ever since. And not just Canada has enjoyed it, but all our trading partners in the United States have enjoyed that as well. Companies have enjoyed that. Individuals have enjoyed that. Think about our lifestyle here in Canada versus what it was pre-1988. It is the single defining event that moved us forward as a country and actually led to what was, for a long time, a world-leading prosperity up in the G7 nations. And now we've come down significantly, but we need to get back there. And this relationship, of course, is the most important part of that. One of the important parts of that free trade agreement, it's little known, was a portion called the Energy Sharing Agreement, where if there was any disruption in the flow of energy between the two countries, we had to jointly share the reductions that were happening. And that would be for both countries, because we actually do produce a lot of resources in Canada. We ship them to the United States, and we flow them back across the border as finished products. So any shortage would affect our consumers on each side of the border, depending where that shortage was or how it happened. And that was because we were facing world security issues at that point in time. That was an important part of this arrangement. For the U.S., it was the linchpin of why they needed Canada in this agreement and why they wanted to do this deal. It surprised me in this last round of Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement when I saw the Minister of International Trade describe that as something she was happy to get off the page, because that was our main card in 1988. And that apparently was not deemed to be so by this administration. And I'm I'm bewildered by that, but I'm certain there must be some reasoning behind it, but I'd like to explore that further. There's another agreement called the Transit Pipelines Agreement, and that was signed in 1977 by Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau. And that ensured that the pipeline transit between our country, our borders, and particularly through the Great Lakes, would continue no matter what. There was a treaty between us, and now we see the interruption of that from a state governor saying, well, we want to interrupt this pipeline because we think it might be environmentally unfriendly. It's never had an accident. It's just pure politics at this point in time, and we need the U.S. government to step in. We need our Prime Minister to actually step forth and enforce that transit pipeline treaty with the U.S. President, because there is some seniority with the federal government here, and that is going to be our main relation. But the irony of the whole situation is if we get that pipeline interrupted, Imperial Oil's already said they're going to have to put their oil at Superior, Wisconsin, onto tankers to get it to market. Same water body and a pipeline that's never had an accident, and more CO2 in tankers than there is in pipelines. So looking at what happens on these strains in relationship between our country, it's been through administrations. And I would say that the Chrétien-Clinton administration, there was some strain. There was more strain under Chrétien, pardon me, Madam Speaker, Prime Minister Chrétien, President Bush Jr., and it leveled out for a decade. President Obama strained it some more under 2 Canadian prime ministers, including the cancellation of the initial Keystone XL, which was brought forward under a subsequent president and now reversed by the current president. So this is an ongoing friction between our countries that has been getting more and more. It's not one event, it's been a series of events as we go through history. The main point here is this relationship that we have between our countries is often exemplified by a relationship between our 2 leaders. And not just a relationship to have dinner together, but a relationship where we actually show up and solve common issues together with the facts on the table. And that's not happening anymore, Madam Speaker. What we need is some serious people to sit down and get this job done. I'm going to move to energy here. I know a lot of what I said is energy so far, but we have great energy trade between our 2 countries. We ship a lot of product, a lot of raw natural resource from Western Canada into the United States, and a lot of it is processed in the United States. Some of it is used in the United States, but a good portion of that energy comes back into Canadian markets. That's our free trading relationship between our 2 countries, and that's the way we built it. That's the way we prospered. But to actually suggest that Canada by itself is energy secure in petroleum products is not looking at the entire situation, because if we actually had a cutoff of our hydrocarbon resource supply from the United States in Eastern Canada, we would suffer. We are an energy-rich country that suffers at some of the ends of the country. We need to integrate that and make sure that we continue to prosper together with the United States and make sure that no parts of our country get cut off. Let's look at our energy trade growth, because you think about how much energy we export from Canada. Oil alone, we export 4 million barrels a day out of a production of about 5 million barrels a day in round numbers. So 80% of our oil is exported primarily to the United States. And that is something we built a nation, a lot of prosperity upon. But it's our balance of trade. It represents $100 billion per year of trade. And that matters to us as a country here as far as our economics and how we enjoy our lifestyle. But the U.S. grew too. The U.S. grew its energy production from 5 million barrels a day at the beginning of President Obama's administration to 13 million barrels per day. So predominantly progressive for both countries as far as the energy supply. Why? Because it is actually a very good resource for the country. I know I'm being signaled here that I've taken too long already. I'd love to talk about the environment more and how we need to move forward together on an environmental arrangement between our 2 countries, and how our current environmental arrangements are not doing that well. But effectively, we're looking at values between our 2 countries here. Democracy, respect for human rights, support for universal education, healthcare, respect for the environment. These are things we share, and free markets is the root of all of this. We need to see the issues that divide us abate and the values joining us succeed. I'm looking forward to this committee's work. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And, in a lot of these discussions that have been taking place over the last week, I've heard a number of members go on and on about the Conservative Party back in the day and the free trade and everything that they stood for back then. Well, yes, the Progressive Conservative Party of Brian Mulroney brought in free trade. And I don't know what they want us to say. I was 11 years old at the time. Did the former Liberals from decades ago perhaps have it wrong? Sure. Do they want us to admit that? I'd be the first to say that maybe they didn't have it right, but I certainly can't accept responsibility, Madam Speaker, given that, we're talking 3 or 4 decades ago. So I guess my question to the member would be, does he not at least recognize, given the number of deals that this government has signed for free trade, that the Liberal Party of today is a supporter of free trade?
The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I really thank my colleague for that intervention. It was informative, and I agree that we have progressed. You're 11 years old when the free trade agreement was signed, and the university you went through was paid for by the prosperity brought by free trade. The health care that you've enjoyed to this point in time was purchased by the prosperity of free trade. So these are linchpin moments in a country, and I really appreciate that your party now embraces what we had to bring forward, and I would look forward to you actually embracing some of the economic policies we're bringing forward now and make sure that we actually advance further on the environmental front and on the economic front between our two countries. Thank you.
As well to address his questions and comments through the chair. Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Rivière-des-Mille-Îles.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je suis désolé pour mon collègue. J'attendais beaucoup son discours. Je l'apprécie énormément. Et malheureusement, le temps a fait en sorte qu'il a été coupé lorsqu'il s'apprêtait à parler de l'économie en lien avec le commerce énergétique en lien avec l'environnement, je crois. Moi, j'aimerais beaucoup l'entendre parler quelques minutes. Comment il peut concilier ces deux éléments-là? L'exploitation du pétrole, d'une part, et faire le parallèle avec la loi C-215 qu'on a tenté de faire passer cette semaine, et pour lequel, malheureusement, ses collègues ont voté contre. Merci.
Je vais lui donner 1 minute, pas quelques minutes, alors qu'il y a une autre question qui attend. L'honorable, the honourable member for Calgary Centre.
Je remercie mon collègue pour la question et s'il va me donner quelque chose ici pour dire en anglais seulement. L'environnement entre the environmental arrangements between our two countries are going to actually lead to what's called carbon leakage. If we proceed in a direction that is actually going to be pressing environmental issues where we have one standard and the U.S. has another standard, we are going to just bleed jobs to the United States. One of the things we need to do in our relationship with the United States is come to a common environmental standard about how we reduce emissions jointly. We are in North America, and we have a common energy environment here, pipelines, supply, and energy that the world envies. And we're not Europe. We don't have conflicts with our neighbors. We actually will enjoy some prosperity together and some reduction in the environmental effects together without conflict if we pursue that jointly. And that should be one of the main things this government brings forward, and I'm hoping as part of this committee here is that we come to a common environmental understanding with our major trading partner. Je vous remercie encore, mon collègue.
We have time for a brief question. The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. President Biden's decision recognizes that subsidizing big oil and gas companies will not, in fact, save workers' jobs. An energy transition plan with a focus on job protection is what workers need. By maintaining subsidies to big business does not do the job. So does the member believe that he's helping shareholders rather than protecting jobs if we keep on with subsidies to big oil?
Brief response from the member for Calgary Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I really thank my colleague for the ability to answer that question. Take a look at what people call subsidies these days is anything you come up with at the end of the day. Because if you look at the oil and gas industry, the industry alone, not the employees, have contributed $600 billion over the last 18 years towards Canadian taxes. That's not a subsidy. If they whittle down, okay, here's an incentive to actually drill in these areas versus another, they're still contributing a significant base to Canadian taxes, the most of any industry in Canada. So this is not subsidizing an industry. This is actually motivating an industry to give more Canadian jobs and actually provide more prosperity to Canada. So I hope that correction of what is spelled out as a subsidy is clear to my colleagues. Thank you, Madam Speaker.